welcome to the, I got to check here, May 9th meeting of the Oshkosh Common Council. If new city clerk would please take the roll.
Sure will. Erickson?
Here.
Ford?
Here.
Stevenson?
Here.
Bulow?
Here.
Hayes?
Here.
Esslinger?
Here.
Mughawar.
Here.
Present 7.
Next will be the invocation by Deputy Mayor Erickson, and then we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance.
We come together this evening to discuss the issues that confront our city. May we honor those who have come before us, including the original stewards of this area, the Menominee and Ho-Chunk nations. May our decisions tonight improve the quality of life in our city and for our residents.
So this evening we have, I want to make sure I get it right, Tazita Van Auckland? Tazetta, I'm sorry, I did check ahead of time, from Oshkosh North. She'll be leading us in the pledge this evening.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we have a certificate of appreciation for coming tonight. I want to thank you for visiting us on such a beautiful night and doing the pledge for us. And thank you for your dad for bringing you here. We'll get a quick photo if you'd like one. And Assistant Principal. You came for her, didn't you? That's for you.
Mayor said so.
Thank you again. Have a good evening.
Nice job.
All right. Next up, introduction of staff. We have two staff members actually to introduce tonight. Take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to do the first introduction because Mr. Fitzpatrick is too afraid to. And then our museum director, Sarah Phillips, is brave enough to do her introduction. I think some of you may know the first person I'm going to introduce. Mike Blank is our new facilities project coordinator, but you may recognize Mike from our engineering division where he served a number of years. So Mike is a self-motivated, hands-on construction professional with 27 years of experience in many areas of the industry. He's been with the city for actually 22 years, so you get an idea that he's been with us a very long time and has an outstanding track record for completion of many large dollar projects in coordination with contractors, department heads, co-workers, and most importantly, our Oshkosh area residents. So some of you, if you've been out there in construction zones, you've probably seen Mike over the years, just helping ease our citizens' minds as they get street projects done. Mike's transitioning from the construction manager supervisor, managing multiple projects in the engineering division, to our newly created position of facilities project coordinator in the facilities maintenance division. So he's going to be coordinating all the large public building projects that we're working on. It's really about overall planning, coordination, and control of each project through all phases from conception to completion. The council has adopted a facilities plan to address a lot of our facility issues. Mike's really going to be the point person on getting those projects done. Will really be our client representative working for, it doesn't matter if it's a police department or city hall or parks. Mike will be that person that will be our representative, and with his experience, I know he's going to be very successful. So he's going to be doing project development, project coordination, administration. He's also going to work on updating our HVAC and roofing program, and also our ADA transition plan that we presented to council a number of months ago about getting that implemented. So there's Mike. I don't know, Mike, anything else you want to add to that? Or
I appreciate the warm welcome. Thanks to everyone.
Well, welcome.
welcome. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks.
And our second introduction is going to be by our museum director, Sarah Phillips.
Hey, Neil, if you want to step up, I'll introduce you. So I am more than happy to introduce our new curator of education, Neil Mathern. As some of you know, the education program at the museum is something that is cornerstone to the foundation of our mission. And Neil is coming on board to really help provide structure and leadership to what that vision is as we move into the future. He joins us from Cherokee Strip Regional Heritage Center in Enid, Oklahoma. Prior to that, he worked at Skidmore College and at the Field Museum. We're very, very excited to have him with us to lead public programs, so doing outreach with the school districts, but also other educational opportunities, aligning curriculum standards, and really helping us move the museum's mission forward. So, would you like to say anything?
Sure.
I'll take Mike's time. Mayor, city manager, council members, I'm very happy to be here. In just a few days, I've seen the unlimited potential at your museum for rich offerings in education. I'm very eager to serve both our students and our lifelong learners, both locally, regionally, and statewide. I also am excited to extend access to both history lovers and those who don't know they love history yet. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Next up, so proclamations. If you'll give me just a quick moment, we're doing this a little different than we kind of have done in the past. Instead of having all read at council meetings, there are some that we issue right through city staff and then mail out to those individuals. We're going to try and make sure that those are just at least memorialized. There's a record of those being issued. There is one tonight that we'll read out loud, and then I think City Manager Roloff's going to accept it on behalf of the city, and then maybe he'll have a few words. So the one actually that we're going to read tonight is actually the Public Service Week recognition. So proclamation, whereas Americans are served every day by public servants at federal, state, county, and city levels who supply continuity to our democratic society, and whereas public employees serve in areas such as health, education, public safety, the arts, the environment, finance, public infrastructure, community planning, human rights, recreation, and more. And whereas the public employees of the city of Oshkosh are committed to exhibiting the highest standards of professional excellence, creativity, skill, and customer service, and whereas the efficiency of government relies on public employees and volunteers who provide services in the quality and quantity required and expected by the public, and whereas the city of Oshkosh recognizes the generous contributions of time and talent by public employees and the importance of their service they render, now, therefore, I, Matt Mugrauer, Mayor of the City of Oshkosh, do hereby proclaim the week of May 8th as Public Service Recognition Week in the City of Oshkosh, and call upon all citizens to recognize and express their appreciation for the important contributions of public employees throughout the city and around the world. Dated May 9th, 2023. So I'll give this to City Manager Roloff. And
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The mayor and I talked about this, and we thought it'd be a good opportunity for me to do a small commercial message, not just to recognize our employees, but to tell you about our employee recognition program that we established in 2017 to recognize employees for their service to the organization and the community, as well as people who in our organization who contribute to the city's mission and vision. The employees can be nominated by peers, citizens, supervisors, division heads, and department heads. And you can find information on our website if you'd like to nominate somebody. The reason I appreciate having the opportunity to do it here is most of our employees are generally recognized by their peers within the organization, and that's certainly very appreciated by the employee to have a fellow employee do that recognition. But every so often, a member of the public is aware that there's this program, and they nominate somebody, which is very meaningful to our employees. And I had the fortune of being able to make a presentation today to one of our employees in Public Works. And, you know, you'll hear a lot about snow plow complaints in the winter. A person called and said, I want to thank this person in particular. I agreed I wouldn't embarrass him today with his name, but obviously one of our snowplow drivers who sometimes that's a thankless job. But the fact that they were recognized by a citizen, I think really adds value to that recognition. So if any other member of the public is out there and sees somebody doing something great, we would love you to check out our website, submit. It's a really quick, nomination form. And I don't pick these individuals. Our employees, employee committee picks who that person is. And I get the fortune of being able to do the presentation. So it's a great way to see who's out there in our organization doing a great job. Now, we have quarterly recognitions. We have 3 levels. We have a star employee, which is just sort of just a basic recognition, and then outstanding service recognition, which is what I did today with the snowplow driver. And then we also have an employee of the quarter. And each employee of the quarter then becomes a candidate for employee of the year. That one I get to pick. So I take the 4 people who have been awarded by our employees. So employee nominated, city manager selected, and you saw that we did that at State of the City this year, where we recognized our firefighters for their rescue on Lake Winnebago last February, which was an incredible story. Those are wonderful ways to recognize employees, and appreciate the opportunity to do that this evening.
Well, no, give council members their fair shake too, but just on behalf of the council, a huge thank you and appreciation for all the city staff that we have, dedicated public servants. I'm always amazed by the can-do spirit that Mark's staff and those on the city staff have and try to do for the people here in Oshkosh. So just a huge round of applause and thank you for all that they do. So. All right, next, citizen statements to council. Citizens are to address the council only. Statements are limited to 5 minutes. Must address items that are not listed on the council meeting agenda, are limited to issues that have an impact on the city of Oshkosh and the common council, may address at a future meeting, and must not include any endorsements of candidates or other electioneering. We have one registered for this evening, Miss Patty Diener. Welcome.
I would like to welcome the new people on the council. Good for a change. I come this evening in regard to Memorial Day's coming up, May 29th. That means we're going to have a service out at the cemetery. And people have fought for freedom. It's not that easy to fight for freedom. But I'm going to show you something tonight. You can all look at it. Think what you want to think. This is how I think. This flag was given to me from, I'm not bringing no politics, from this gentleman down in Fonda. He was here. This was presented to me when I didn't think my husband was going to make it. And he said, I think I'll have a flag flown and give it to you now. Okay? I have people that I know that serve this is called the Navy, Army, Air Force, and National Guard.
Use the microphone.
My name is Patricia
Nope,
Diener.
gotcha.
And some young lady, she's older now. She had a son named Laverne Darling. One day, they came to her door. And you talk about freedom? He didn't get the freedom. He was aboard ship and went to sea. These men and people fight for our country. And I have a lot of friends, and I have a lot of family, and I have a lot of officers that paid the price. And you guys all say, nurses are heroes. Doctors are heroes. Nurses are heroes. People reach out and help when they need it. And sometimes Patty is not always happy in that. But when you know you have an officer come to my door with me and take my husband in an ambulance, and it didn't look good, then people will realize what I've gone through. And I had another friend just pass away. Probably people don't know who he is. His name was Dewey Moore. Dewey Moore was a very good friend of mine and my mother. He used to have an ambulance service. and he lived on Jackson. And he had 3 boys. And his nurse came to his rescue. This is why he passed away. You know, that man was a coroner. That man was on the Humane Society board. He went to get his degree. You know, a lot of people weren't happy with him, but you know what? Someday I'll see him. He's in a place, in a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. Next, we're on to consent agenda. There's no one registered to speak. I'll take a motion in a second for consent.
So moved.
Second. Do we want to?
Mr. Mayor?
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to request that council pull number 14 so I can give some
Yep.
information on that.
No problem. Any other? Yep.
I'd like to have number, Mr. Roloff, help me out here. We were talking about it.
Oh, number 220, I believe.
No.
It was. Not that one? You're good with that one now?
227.
Oh, the liaisons.
Appointment of council members?
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion on the remaining items? Seeing none, if the city clerk will take the roll on consent minus 227 and 228.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Stevenson,
Aye.
Bulow,
Aye.
Hayes,
Aye.
Esslinger,
Aye.
Mughawar.
Aye. Resolution 23-227, appointments of council members as liaisons to boards and commissions. Need a motion and a second.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? It's all yours, Mr. Esslinger.
Thank you, Mayor. I did look over the report. Well, first of all, I know this is for council member, and help me again, Mark, I don't know if this is where we talk about the council member participation, or,
It's either here or the other one. It probably works either way, but I think you're,
okay, all right. Well, I read the report by Deputy Mayor Erickson and former board member Miller. Great report, by the way. That was fantastic. I think it was very, very well done. As I got done reading it, I kind of said to myself, maybe there was one thing that was overlooked, and it's overlooked because I think it's so simple, is asking the question of whether council members should even be on boards and commissions. So I had a talk with Mr. Roloff before the meeting, and there are 2 boards and commissions that are statutorily required to have a council member, and that's the redevelopment, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Roloff, the Plan Commission and the Redevelopment Authority.
yeah, that's my recollection.
Yeah, okay. So, I guess maybe some thought here. I don't know if this is something that can be, with the injection of this new thought, can lay it over, or if we still want to proceed forward. But I think we all talk about getting citizens involved more in local government. We like that when that happens. But then we're taking up a spot on a board or commission where that, in my opinion, it's better to have a citizen take that spot. And furthermore, when we are sitting on a board or commission, we're going to take a vote on it that day, and then it comes to the council, we get another vote on it on another day. And again, I think that's kind of cheating the purpose of the boards and commissions. Now, one can argue that in some cases, we have a hard time, getting people to serve on the boards and commissions. And I'm not saying that council members, can still go with citizens. We all have that right. If we want something to go through traffic or the plan commission or whatever, we can still do that if we want. At the boards and commissions, all the ones I've served on, we've had staff members that are there to answer questions, quite frankly, better than council members can. So I just, to me, and by the way, Mayor, I did look at all the, as far as the council goes, where you've got people placed, I have absolutely no problem with it. I think great job. So this is not not to criticize what you've got here, it's just, I think, for me, I would like to see council members not on these boards and commissions to allow for more citizens to serve, so I guess I just want to put that out there. I don't know if this is something that, again, as I said, if we can lay this over, if someone wants more time to think about that, or if maybe the staff, Ms. Erickson's still on the council yet, I don't know, I'd love to hear her thoughts on that, if that came up in your investigation or analysis of the boards and committees. If it did, I'd like to hear the input on that. So I guess I'm just throwing that out there, and if you want to bat it around and however you want to proceed, don't know. Thank you.
Yeah, no, Mr. Buell, you're up next.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul, for raising that. I just wanted to add that I see the critical role of having the council members on the boards and commissions to be the liaison for that, so that when we do come together as the 7 of us and we're trying to think of, well, why would Transit Advisory Board approve this? Or, did the, Housing Authority Board look at this thing? Or did, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, did they consider that? Then there's somebody here who has been in those meetings and been in that role, so then they can speak back to the council at large. So, not that I disagree with you completely or anything like that, but that's the role that I see as having council members serve on those boards, is to be able to take what those 7 people have come up with as a consensus and then bring that back to the city council at large.
Well, we do get the minutes of meetings, and again, we do have the city staff that are present at these meetings, so I don't know if it's better to get it from a council member or a staff member, but that information is available.
I'll go a little bit here. No, and I get the concept. I get the, Mr. Esslinger and I talked very briefly last week on the topic. We do have one off the top of my head. I believe that's DEI, where we have a council liaison that doesn't have a voting role. They are the true definition of a liaison. I know myself, having served on numerous different boards and commissions, that's the view, that's the role I take, I try to take. It's hard sometimes, but that's the role that I think we're supposed to take, is that we're supposed to liaise back and forth. Whether we had a voting spot or not, it doesn't, I'm ambivalent to that part of it, whether we, as a council member, vote or not, because every other Tuesday night, to your point, I get to have my say up here. I don't need to have that or put my thumb on the scale, during a board and commission meeting. But I do think it's important, to Mr. Bulow's point, that we're present, we're a part of those discussions, that we're, active in that process, because we do have that role of trying to make sure that our intent is shared down to the board level and that their intent is also shared properly back to us. So whether it's voting or not, I think it's an interesting topic. Mr. Ford.
Yeah, no, I share your thoughts on voting. I'm ambivalent to that. I try my best to be a liaison. I'm thinking my own personal experience. I think I was on 4 or 5 years on a couple of boards and commissions prior to being on council, and I know I always appreciated having a council member there, someone who could speak more to the governance side as opposed to the operations side, being that connection, especially in situations where maybe staff and the board aren't on the same page or don't want the same things. I think that happens, maybe more than we like to admit. So I do think there's value, and again, I listen to my colleagues here, but I have felt like people have been happy to have a council member, to the point where they've really been thankful and even been upset if they didn't have a council member attending their meetings. So I'm fine with the current situation, but I do agree on the voting thing. I could go either way on that. I'm the same way. I try to respect whatever the majority opinion is on that board, whether or not yeah.
So maybe we vote on this, and we can always change our minds, but as part of the next one later on, it's also a further discussion of.
Yeah, what's the other one we got?
235, number 21. So if we want to.
Let me look at that. I messed this up.
Have a further discussion on.
235?
That's the one.
Yeah, number 21.
Number 21, and it's.
23-235.
Yeah. Right. Okay, all right. Sounds good.
If there's no further discussion, we'll take the roll on 23-227.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Stevenson,
Aye.
Bulow,
Aye.
Hayes,
Aye.
Esslinger,
Aye.
Mughawar.
Aye.
Carried 7.
Actually, and before we move on to the next one, I do a point of clarification just for council members. There was 3 other boards or commissions that I have liaisons selected for, but given that we had a topic later in the evening about potential consolidation, potential elimination, I just held those back. And then, depending on our actions later on, those will be on the next council meeting. So just so you guys are aware. Resolution 23-228, approved combination Class B license, special Class B licenses. Approved transfer of combination Class B license. I'll take a motion and a second.
Move it.
Second.
Discussion. City manager, I think you wanted to pull, so.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The council a while back had asked that when we are issuing a brand-new combination Class B license, what that is that's the full liquor license that a bar would get, that we bring it back to council because those, and Councilmember Esslinger may recall from the past, the process that had been done to.
Is that what you
issue the
call it, a
liquor license.
process?
I'm being more polite than I think I called it the beauty pageant. And for those of you who'd gone through Leadership Oshkosh, you saw how that was sort of addressed as well. We have a number of open licenses, and we do, as part of the application process, ask the applicant to provide some information about their benefit to the community, to economic development type of thing, because there is an economic development element to having an establishment with one of these licenses. And frankly, it's very difficult to take one of those licenses away. So when you're issuing it, it's a long-term commitment. With that said, in recent years, there's been turnover on those, but council had asked us to point these out whenever they were brand-new ones. We had failed to do that in the memo, but then as we were discussing it among staff, we're like, we need to at least make you aware of that. So the one in question is on page 109. It's the combination Class B license for Fairways on Main. The address is 519 North Main Street. So that's the one that is brand new. The one just below it is simply a transfer from a restaurant that's changing location. So that's not anything big, but council did ask for the new one. So I'm just pointing that out and happy to answer any questions that you might have. Honestly, I don't have a great deal of information about this specific location or anything, but obviously it's a Main Street establishment.
I think it's the magnet.
The old magnet,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Councilmember Buell.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so there's nothing in the application that gave any city members any concern or pause?
No, it was okay, but we're like, we were supposed to tell you that, so it's okay.
No other questions? We'll take the roll on 23-228.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Stevenson,
Aye.
Bulow,
Aye.
Hayes,
Aye.
Esslinger,
Aye.
Mughawar.
Aye.
Carried 7.
Pending ordinance, ordinance 23-229, approved zone change from heavy industrial district HI to heavy industrial district with a planned development overlay HIPD for property located at 2665 Oregon Street. Plan Commission recommends approval. I'll need a motion and a second.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, when you're ready, take the roll.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Stevenson,
Aye.
Bulow,
Aye.
Hayes,
Aye.
Esslinger,
Aye.
Mughawar.
Aye.
Carried 7.
Ordinance 23-230, establish no parking on West Ripple Avenue, south side from Oregon Street to Red Oak Court. Motion and a second, please.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
I have a question.
Go right ahead.
Have we talked with this business that this is happening? Do they know?
Yes, the businesses are aware, and a lot of this also came from the residents on Red Oak Court. That's really where that initiated.
Sure. And as, with the conversations with the business, are they going to increase parking? Like, do they have a solution, I guess, lined up yet, or?
They honestly don't use the on-street parking that often. Every once in a while, you might see a truck that's out there kind of waiting to see where they're supposed to go, but this was really more an inconvenience for the residents on Red Oak Court because they're trying to go in if a truck was parked there it became an inconvenience for them as they're trying to negotiate getting into their residence. So that's pretty much what we got. Is that fair enough, or is there more to it than that? Looks like Mark's face says there's more to it than that.
Part of what brought this to the city's attention was the construction that's going on in that area, and one of the parking lots is being reconstructed, which did generate a little bit more traffic onto the roadway. Kind of looking at it proactively was why this decision came up. It's not necessarily long-term. We can address it now to assist the current situation and make sure long-term, as Mark said, when there are trucks or stuff getting ready to enter, the two businesses and their roadway stays open and safe for the residents to get to their homes.
Thanks.
No other discussion? You can take the roll on 23-230.
Erickson.
Aye.
Ford.
Aye.
Stevenson.
Aye.
Bulow.
Aye.
Hayes.
Aye.
Esslinger.
Aye.
Mughawar.
Aye.
Carried 7.
Ordinance 23-231, extend no parking during school hours on Smith Avenue to 4 PM, south side. Take a motion and a second, please.
So moved?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, please take the roll.
Erickson.
Aye.
Ford.
Aye.
Stevenson.
Aye.
Bulow.
Aye.
Hayes.
Aye.
Esslinger.
Aye.
Mughawar.
Aye.
Carried 7.
On to new resolutions. Resolution 23-232, approve revised fund balance policy. Take a motion and a second, please.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on this? Finance Director Van Goppel, if you want to give us a brief update as to what long-range finance has done here?
Yeah, very quickly, we had a fund balance policy in place. Went to long-range finance to make a change or amendment. The amendment, for everybody's attention, is adding minimum working capital for enterprise funds. It's the last part of the policy that you have included in your packet. It's all underlined, and we had some conversations in the past about the working capital within our enterprise funds, particularly some comments about the reserves and fund balance in the stormwater, water, and wastewater utilities. And so we've documented and put into play a definition of a minimum working capital for enterprise funds.
Any questions? Thank you, sir. We'll take the roll on 23-232.
Erickson.
Aye.
Ford.
Aye.
Stevenson.
Aye.
Bulow.
Aye.
Hayes.
Aye.
Esslinger.
Aye.
Mughawar.
Aye.
Carried 7.
Resolution 23-233, approve rental fees for Lakeshore Park Four Seasons Building. Take a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Councilmember Bulow.
The only question I had is, for like the weekend rate and everything, you wouldn't be locked into doing a full weekend. You could do just one day at a time for those rentals.
Yeah, the weekend rate is actually if you rent it on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. So that's a per-day rental.
Per day rent, okay.
Yes.
That was my only question.
As long as you're there, you want to give us a quick hit on maybe when it'll be completed and when we can start seeing some reservations in there? I'll give you a little plug here.
Sure. So this will be a very unique facility for our park, and I think for northeastern Wisconsin. I think it's a really unique building on the water that'll be available for use by the general public, obviously, city departments potentially, special events through our department and other city departments. We are looking at, due to some material and equipment delays, it's been extended. Right now, I'm being told by the end of June that things should be completed. I'm being a little more, I'm holding off a little bit and saying that we're going to start taking reservations this fall. As soon as I have a good feeling for that, we'll get the information out there. But it's going along very well right now. It will accommodate up to 125 to 150 people. The assembly room will have basically an open view of the water. It'll be all glass doors and windows that go around. And then there's doors that open up to the patio that allows for that extra 25 people to congregate on the patio as well. When you rent it, there is a small kitchenette that will be in there. We're going to have tables and chairs available. So a very, very unique building, I think, that the city would be proud of.
No, it should be a great asset for our rental inventory, and like you said, it's a great location right on the river, and you can't beat the views. Councilmember Ford.
Yeah, I know the answer, but I had a resident ask me if there'll be food and alcohol could be brought in.
Yes, it is just like if you're renting a shelter in a park. So
Perfect.
Park rules will obviously still be in effect, so we'll encourage no glass bottles and those types of things. But yes, alcohol is permitted.
Awesome, thank you.
Yes.
No other questions? We'll take the roll on 23-233.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Stevenson,
Aye.
Bulow,
Aye.
Hayes,
Aye.
Esslinger,
Aye.
Mughawar.
Aye.
Carried 7.
Resolution 23-234, approve general development plan and specific implementation plan to allow outdoor commercial entertainment at 2665 Oregon Street. Plan Commission recommends approval. Need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? I don't see any, and I don't want to put them on the spot, but I think the applicant is here if we did have any questions, but otherwise,
I thought it was a really well put together proposal.
right ahead. No, I'm just excited, you know, a business is thriving, a business is trying to expand a little bit, right? If you want to come up over here and we'll give you the floor for a few moments to talk about your project. Something on the south side.
Yeah, thank you, City Council and the Plan Commission for going through this. We opened our distillery. Grand opening was a sturgeon spearing weekend, and business has been great. We're having a lot of fun with it. It is my retirement project, and it is a really great opportunity. And now I've got a great piece of property and plenty of space, and so we're going to add a patio for outdoor entertainment. Hopefully get that done by the end of May or June, whenever construction gets done, but I'm very excited about it, and I appreciate the council for taking a look at this. So thanks, everybody, and come out and see us. We have a lot of fun flavors and fun experience out of Sturgeon Spirits.
Thank you very much. If there's no other questions, we'll take the roll on 23-234.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Stevenson,
Aye.
Bulow,
Aye.
Hayes,
Aye.
Esslinger,
Aye.
Mughawar.
Aye.
Carried 7.
Final resolution 23-235, approve board, commission, and committee, subcommittee recommendations.
Move it.
Second?
Discussion. Deputy Mayor Erickson, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Since I was on the subcommittee that's put together these recommendations, I'll kick it off, and then I'm going to pass it to staff to share the staff perspective. So just to give some background on kind of what we did, why we did it, former council member Miller and I, along with both city manager and assistant city manager, we've, from the direction of city council, we kind of embarked on this project to look at all of the boards and commissions that the city has to see what's working well, what's not working well, how can we make them more effective, and take some input both from staff and the boards and commissions. So we met with all of the department heads whose department staff the 13 optional boards and commissions. We focused on the optional ones. And we also met with all of those board chairs. So I'll give kind of a overview of the main findings that we had from the board chair perspective, and then I'll pass it off to share the staff perspective. But really the main concerns that we heard from board chairs were issues being able to meet quorum, sometimes having to cancel meetings last minute or not being able to vote on items because of a member not being able to make it to the meeting for a variety of issues, whether it's work, childcare, all of those things. Sometimes the scope or charge of the board or commission was no longer relevant or felt misaligned, or they weren't able to advise on what was originally intended. Many board chairs brought up the turnover of members being an issue, and also the need to recruit and onboard new board or commission members and get them up to speed on kind of the role of a board or commission, what the charge is, and so forth. I think some of the positive things that we learned, board chairs recognize the value of having boards and commissions, the community engagement, their role in ultimately advising us as city council. And to Councilmember Esslinger's point, We didn't get too much into whether or not to continue having council members serve as liaisons or be appointed to those boards or commissions, but some board chairs did bring up kind of an appreciation for that liaison role to kind of share at the council level. In our agendas, we have opportunities to share updates from those boards and commissions. So that was helpful for them to be able to stay updated on both what's going on in council related to their board or commission and for us to know what was going on. And I think a big piece of this, we heard from staff, the amount of time and capacity that it takes to facilitate these boards or commissions. So I'm going to pass it off to City Manager Roloff, Assistant City Manager Fitzpatrick, to talk through the staff side of what we found.
I think Mr. Fitzpatrick is going to start, and then I'll just add a little commentary to that.
Sure, I'd be happy to start. Appreciate the kind words about the report. I think Council Member Erickson and Miller did a great job. The one thing that was universal from the staff and also the citizenry was they really appreciated the fact that we were just asking them how it was going. They thought that that was really very thoughtful and appreciated the opportunity to express their opinions about, what was working, what wasn't working. And also it was interesting to see that there was quite a bit of commonality from the staff perspective and also from the citizen board chair perspective. So I think that was helpful when the council members were formulating how they wanted this report to be compiled. So one thing that I thought might be helpful for the council members, because when the report was compiled, we didn't provide specific data. We referred to research that staff had done about the problems with boards and commissions in terms of meetings being canceled and things like that. So just for your additional information, I thought I would just share a little more specific detail. So during that time frame from 2020 to 2022, and we didn't include anything from this year yet, 2023. There were 134, and I'm just talking about the optional boards now. There were 134 meetings that were canceled during that time period, which was pretty substantial. And we also looked at the detail associated with why they were canceled. Obviously, we had COVID during that time period. We had a cyber attack that, limited our ability to hold meetings. But really, those impacts on that 134 cancellation number were pretty minimal. There were only 16 meetings that were canceled due to COVID, a holiday, Senior Center Expo, and our cyber attack. So the balance of that 134, 118 remainder were really related to some of the issues that Councilmember Erickson talked about. We had difficulty establishing quorums, and that really had kind of a compounding effect on, I think, the boards and commissions. So when people weren't attending, or when we weren't able to reach a quorum, meetings were canceled, citizens were frustrated because they had maybe made arrangements with their significant other to be there, or with their kids to be there. And then when those meetings were canceled, it was very frustrating, as you can imagine, for them, because they made a commitment to serve, and then they weren't able to participate. And correspondingly with staff, there's a tremendous amount of work for a lot of these boards and commissions, for the staff liaisons, compiling the documents, establishing the agenda. And as some of these meetings became more and more difficult to formulate a quorum for, kind of a phenomenon that occurred with staff, and maybe you as staff liaisons recognize this. You'd have staff liaisons contacting these members, a couple weeks ahead of time, then a week ahead of time, then the day of the meeting. It wouldn't be uncommon for staff to reach out to people that are on these boards and commissions like 3 and 4 times to say, hey, we don't have a quorum yet, are you coming? You know, we really like to let everybody know so they aren't inconvenienced. So that's just a little more detail about some of the problems that were generated, and then the turnover on the boards and commissions. Because there was so much turnover, I think it also contributed to, as Councilmember Erickson talked about, the maybe lack of understanding of the charge that the council designed for that board and commission, and they had their own ideas about what this board or commission should or shouldn't be doing. And then that further frustrated not only staff, but citizens who participated. It was like, well, I thought we were here to do this, and we're not really focusing on what the council intended. And then, you know, only council can answer the question as to, you know, through all these missed meetings, you know, were these advisory boards really helping the council make this better decisions, which is their purpose, to provide advice, to provide additional information for them. So that's just a little more detail that wasn't included in the report, but it helped, I think, Councilmember Erickson and Miller formulate their ideas and recommendations.
The only thing I would add is, you know, there's a lot of lost opportunity cost when staff goes to the effort of creating an agenda, posting it, and doing all the work, and then it doesn't happen. It's one thing if it's just canceled, we know in weeks in advance. Plan Commission a couple weeks ago was canceled for a lack of items. Lack of items is one thing, because then it's really no harm, no foul. That's not an issue. But it's when we go to that effort and then all that effort is gone, and then it has to get replicated to either reschedule the meeting or do it over again. So that's one issue. The other one, from a staffing standpoint, particularly in community development, because some of our staff are funded in part by the Community Development Block Grant Program, for example. So when we say we're going to take this person, they're going to devote 20% of their time, and it's going to be funded through Community Development Block Grant dollars, what we're saying is 20% of that person's time is committed to programs that benefit low and moderate income people. And if they're working on, say, the Landmarks Commission, and it's cutting into their time, and then they have a false start, and then they've wasted that time, that's time that they can't make up. They have to commit 20% of their time. We have an obligation to do that. So that's something that we're always keeping an eye on to make sure that we're compliant with that. So it's little things like that, that the staff time, if it's wasted, you can't necessarily get that back. And I think that was something that was weighing heavily on that. So that's something that I'm certainly aware of, especially within the Department of Community Development, because so many of those committees are offshoots of initiatives that started in community development.
One more thing that I can add that Mark just jogged my memory that we discussed with the subcommittee. Even the lack of business, you know, that contributed to the thought process that the subcommittee brought forward with their recommendations, because some of the groups were very narrowly focused, and because they were so narrowly focused, they didn't have a lot of agenda items, so then they wouldn't meet on a regular basis. And so, you know, rather than meeting monthly, they would meet like every 3 months, and then when they met, the meetings would go like 10 minutes or so. Some of the thought process associated with some of the consolidation was, hey, let's make this more efficient. Let's make it a better experience for the participants. Let's provide the opportunity for cross dialogue with issues that, you know, might require departments and liaisons from other areas. So those are some of the other things that were also discussed.
I think I can take questions. And again, just a reminder that this document is is what we're voting on whether or not to approve. The recommendations, depending on how discussion goes, or if council chooses to act on any of the recommendations included, that'll be a future agenda item.
Yeah, anything would require ordinance changes, we'll have to bring that back subsequently. So this is really, you know, what things do you want to necessarily consider, not consider, so we can, the city attorney is prepared to make ordinance changes, but based on what the discussion goes, she's kind of at a point where there's only so much she can do before we get direction from the council.
Councilmember Stevenson first, followed by Councilmember Buelow.
Yeah, I guess first I'd like to say I like what you guys did. I think you found a problem and really tried to get after it. I do like bringing the committees down. When I think about having 9, 10, 11 people in a room, you get a little bit of too many cooks in the kitchen, I think, type of situation. So I really like that, reducing the number of people. I think consolidating the kind of traffic encompassing boards. I didn't even realize we had that many traffic-related committees. It's a really good idea. I've probably used these ones interchangeably talking about them. The one that I am a little leery about is combining the museum and the public arts. That one seems a little disjointed, and we did get an email from the museum board asking us to not do this. So, I mean, if there's background that I maybe don't know on this one, or if there's more insights you can give, please do so.
Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I would pause for that.
I'd be happy to do that. I think that our approach with the public museum has a wonderful opportunity to broaden its impact on our community. I think right now our museum's impact is limited to the building on Algoma Boulevard. And it's a wonderful facility. I'm a member. I love the public museum. But I believe that there's an opportunity to expand our footprint beyond the borders of the public museum. And I think our museum staff is uniquely qualified to address issues such as public art. I know there's a member of the museum board that's also on the public art board and disagrees with that. But I would ask you, why do you think that person is on both of those boards? I think there is a great deal of consistency with that. When you think about some of our public art, it's an artifact that needs to be cared for. And our museum staff, they're the ones that have the skills to preserve those very types of items. Oftentimes, we refer that to our parks board, or our parks department, which is very competent when you want to mow and when you want to maintain a building. When you want to talk about maintain public art, with all due respect to Ray and his wonderful staff, that is not their skill set. It is absolutely in the museum's wheelhouse. And I think there's a wonderful opportunity there. I respect the opinion of the museum board, but I think there's also members of the museum board that recognize that there are opportunities that we're not taking advantage of. And I would ask them to think broader about the opportunities that the public museum represents. And my part of it is, if you make the museum more relevant out in the community, they're going to say, hey, we need to check out that place, that old house on Algoma Boulevard. I've never been there. We're celebrating our 100th anniversary next year, and there are many people in town who have never visited the public museum. If the museum gets out in the community with public art and things like that, I believe it will in turn get people more interested in the museum and more visitors to the museum. So I think the museum's success can be even greater by opening ourselves up and making the museum a museum for the entire community, not just for people who would like to look at old stuff in an old house. That's minimizing the wonder and beauty. And Ms. Phillips has done an outstanding job of telling stories about, it's not just about old stuff. Let me tell you about the Tiffany glass, and her eyes light up when she talks about, with great pride, one of the reasons she came to our public museum was our Tiffany glass collection. And we just kind of dismissed it as, oh, well, it's just nice glass. It is one of the most unique glass collections in the entire country. And we have it right here in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Telling that story and bringing it home makes much more depth to the museum, and I think a wonderful opportunity exists if we do something like that. So did I take away all your thunder, Sarah, or? All right.
Well, I'll steal a little bit of his thunder. Sarah just did a good job, I think, talking about the curator of education. And when we had our interviews with the staff, it was evident that that is a priority for the museum moving forward. And, certainly education associated with the history of the museum is one thing, but having the opportunity then to expand that education to include art and other areas of the city, it's just another opportunity, as Mark said, to expand that footprint, physically and also, mentally for those students that are going to have the benefit of working with Neil and Sarah and all of our great staff. And I know, Mark, you talked about the assignments and the workload for people, and I know that you've already considered this, and I thought maybe you might want to touch on that too.
Yes, thank you. I know Deputy Mayor Erickson and I had talked about this. One of the things that the committee noticed was that there could be some efficiencies built in with staff assignments, because the staff assignments aren't made by the council. The council creates a board or commission, and it's assumed a lot of times what the committees or what the department's going to be assigned to it, and that makes sense. Regardless of what you decide to do with respect to the museum board, I'm going to assign the Public Art Committee to Ms. Phillips in the museum, because I think that the museum staff is the right group for that. Similarly, the committee did not make a recommendation on the Landmarks Commission. I'm also going to assign that to the Public Museum because of their unique skill set, and that will provide relief in community development. Ms. Phillips has taken on one or perhaps two more boards, depending on what the council does. I believe it should only be one. I think we can be much more efficient, and I think could create some great opportunities. Towards that point, we're preparing for a June 16th dedication of the new plaques for the Chief Oshkosh, around the Chief Oshkosh statue. The staff taking the lead on that is Ms. Phillips and her staff, because they know this stuff. Ray ordered the plaques. Ray will get the concrete in. Ray will do all that physical stuff. But the history and the culture, their staff the museum staff's working closely with the Menominee tribe to, if you went to the powwow a couple years ago, it was a wonderful event. My only criticism of it was it was too close to High Avenue. It was a little tight for that. It'll be at Menominee Park, and it'll be wonderful for the community. And it's because of Sarah and her staff that you're going to see a great event, working very closely with the Menominee tribe, who are super engaged in this. And that's because of the outreach that Sarah and her staff have done.
Councilmember Bulow.
Excellent. Thank you for that, and I'm glad I paused for it, because that answered a lot of questions that I had. I have a couple comments. Number one, and you brought this up a bunch of times, but the efficiency. I have served on several boards and committees, and Jane Weber does an amazing job on the transport side, but she really does have to email 3 and 4 times sometimes to make sure that we have quorum, and then if it gets canceled, if it, something like that. And to think that we are spending our wonderful city employees' time trying to, chase those down to where we could possibly combine that into 3 committees or 3 commissions for the transport, just for that one especially. A question I had for Fitzpatrick and Deputy Mayor, you said you guys did talk to each of the chairs of the committees. Was there concern about the Public Museum and Public Arts combination when you talked to those chairs?
Can you say that again, Carl?
Yeah, when you talked to the chairs, was there concern at that point between the Public Museum and Public Arts boards combining? Did they know that you were thinking about possibly doing that?
I don't think I was the person who met with the.
I can answer that one. I think, if I remember correctly, and if I'm looking at my notes right, it did come up with Public Arts, and there was kind of an openness of if there's alignment, whether it be Landmarks or other boards, if it makes sense. There was an openness generally.
Okay.
But I don't think at that time we didn't have a specific ask of
Okay.
Merging with the museum board.
Sure.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think the dots were connected after you talked to both of them.
Yeah.
So, and that was part of their role, was to say, okay, what's the museum saying, what's
Sure.
public art? And I think an opportunity just presented itself, but it's consistent with what the discussions that Ms. Phillips has been having with the museum board about expanding their influence in the community.
And her staff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And 100%
yeah,
love
it's not all
that.
Sarah. Her staff is enthusiastic about it too.
Yeah, I love getting the museum out of the building and into the public. Love that. Mr. Mayor, how are you doing on applications to boards and committees?
Can always use more. Without going into too much depth, it always is a struggle. Right now, we're sitting okay. When you go out there and look at the vacancy reports, it looks worse than it really is. We've got a lot of, we've never had a youth applicant. So we went through a long exercise a while back of adding youth spots to all of our boards and commissions, and yet we still haven't had one. So further down this discussion path, you may hear from me on that one. What helps is you should see open spots at alternates, in my opinion, because that means alternates are moving up into full seats. And so then the alternates are the ones that I should see vacancies for, and then those are the ones that we should be actively looking to fill. Given that this was on the agenda, given knowing that this was coming, I've been waiting to do any appointments and even actively recruit, because I don't want to go through an effort of recruiting somebody and telling somebody I want to put you on a board, and then all of a sudden, sorry, I don't got a spot for you, because we're going to reduce it from 7 down to 5 or 9 down to 5 on some of these boards. So
Sure.
I hope that kind of answers your question.
It kind of did.
Okay.
But you also brought up my next one, and this is not a question, but it's just an overall concern. I think that the 5 member committee makes sense in most of them. The only concern I have is then you have the potential of 3 people recommending a pretty big decision sometimes if they only had 3 show up to that meeting for their quorum. I get it, but I just wanted to voice a little bit of hesitancy on, like, and that could even be a council liaison if we continue down that path, and I think we should, but it could be a council liaison and 2 other citizens making a recommendation back to council, and that's a pretty narrow set of voices.
Good point. Councilmember Ford, and then I think City Manager Roloff or Fitz would like to go after that.
Yeah, I mean, my logical counter to that argument that it's having 3 people is a heck of a lot better than not making quorum and having nobody giving us advice.
Okay.
That happens way too often. So I mean, I get where you're coming from, but I think 5 makes sense. But thanks to everybody who was involved in putting this together. I think it was fabulous work. Really interesting. It's really healthy for us to be reviewing our boards and commissions regular intervals, make sure that they're still relevant, that they're aligned with our community's priorities, and that we're respecting the time and talents of our volunteers, but also our city staff. I also want to really take a few moments maybe to think about kind of the future role of our boards and commissions and stress that these are meant to be truly advisory and function at the pleasure of the council, which is why we're having this discussion here. And I state that because I've noticed just in the last 3 years here that there's sometimes some confusion that these are meant to be legislative committees like we have in Madison, and that ordinances should be sent to committees first and come to us. That's really not what the role of these are. They're truly meant to advise, and I think we really have to embrace that and educate people on that, because then they're going to be more useful serving as that bridge between the community's values and our decision-making. Also think it's important along that note to emphasize that these are not meant to be operational committees. It's a governance function that we're playing. And I bring that up because it's going to be really important when budget season comes that we have strong committees serving in an advisory fashion. And equally important that any of the enhancements we get for position requests or otherwise come from the operations side of the organization, so the city manager in particular. I know the last couple of years we've had a weird enhancement process that I know I expressed frustration with, but I think part of the reason for that was that we weren't very clear and haven't done this for a while, and clarifying what our boards and committees are legally supposed to be doing. As to the report, I do hope we accept it tonight. I think it makes perfect sense. It's certainly consistent with the stated goals we had when we embarked on this process. It's healthy for us to have a review, make sure we're serving our 67,000 constituents well. I do want to emphasize, like Council or Deputy Mayor Erickson pointed out, that we're not going to make any formal decisions on any of these changes until we accept this report and advise the city attorney to bring it back to us. And my hope is that in that time frame, we spend some time educating our committees about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and explain, what committees have become obsolete and why. So things like the rental inspections thing. I think that's a really obvious example of one we don't need because the law changed and it doesn't have its role anymore. But then things like was just brought up, and you explained it really well, the arts and museum board, and the fact that we're not trying to devalue either of those missions, but instead trying to find ways that we could actually, I'm going to use a buzzword here, but find synergies, right? But find overlaps so we can really enhance and allow
It's like
both,
a 2010
both of these organizations. Yeah, I know. I'm 40.
2010 buzzword.
I'm 41. To me, it's like Pearl Jam 1990s, baby. So I'll try to limit the buzzwords. But we're not trying to devalue anybody here. We're trying to expand the impact of the boards and commissions that we do have. And that's important because there's always going to be hurt feelings anytime we have change. But I think it's our duty to make sure we answer all the questions, are as transparent as possible, but mostly build a structure that's efficient and effective so that we can serve our constituents. So happy to support this tonight.
Assistant City Manager Fitzpatrick, I think, wanted to go next.
Right, I just wanted to answer Councilmember Buell's question with just some more facts about our interactions with the boards and commissions. So we actually discussed, I believe, with traffic and parking. We talked to that chair, and we talked about that very issue that you brought up about the number of 5. And so he expressed the same concern that you did. But then he continued to talk, and we also talked to Brad, who was he was the chair for Bike and Ped, and those are two of the groups that are, being recommended to be consolidated. And one of the good points I thought that was brought up, and maybe it speaks a little bit to Councilmember Esslinger's point earlier, was, there could be a decision that is based on 3 people, but ultimately the council makes the decision.
That's correct.
They're the ones at the end that can really make that ultimate decision. So I understand the concern about maybe a small group trying to steer things, and also, as Councilmember Ford mentioned, they are advisory and you're the final determinants. So it's just, I thought it was a good point that chair brought up, and it's something for you to maybe consider as well.
Councilmember Stevenson, you have the floor.
Yeah, and I think what Mike said is kind of, if in this meantime, in this interim, if you guys can reach out to some of these committees, especially, just because I know we've gotten pushback from the Public Museum Board, and maybe emphasize to them their new role that they could take. The only thing that I want to be very hesitant about is I don't want to merge committees, have them be upset about it, and then have them not maybe want to do their new purview. If we have like a museum board that's just wants to do the museum, and all of a sudden we say, here's the arts that you now get to do, and they're kind of hurt feelings about that. I just want to make sure we have this synergy. I think what you described makes sense. I think getting the museum out there, I think it's going to be good for them. A lot of people do kind of forget about them. I was on the museum board for a while, and it's definitely an asset to our committee. So if there's just, maybe if museum staff or if everybody just wants to maybe talk with that board a little bit on opportunities, I guess. So,
part of the resolution is to implement these things. If there's anything you would like us to hold back on, pulling the trigger on 1 or 2 of them, that is entirely within council's purview. We certainly do exactly what you're describing. If there's anything you just don't want to implement immediately, and I think that's why the mayor said, I'm not doing the appointments until I hear from you. But I would say if we defer, I would suggest that you appoint those ones so that there's continuity, because we want to have quorums. But that's okay. Then it makes implementing a little more difficult, but it's not impossible. When we merged the Grand Opera House Advisory Board and the Landmarks Commission, there was some tweaking we had to do because of terms ending and stuff like that. It's a little more difficult, but it's not impossible. If you want to defer, just, tell us, don't pull the trigger on those. Those are ones that the city attorney doesn't have to do for the next meeting, but if there's ones we want to eliminate this committee or merge these committees, those are the ones we'll bring back. If you want to hold off on any of the other ones, just let us know and we'll do that as well.
Mr. Bueller?
So just to confirm, so we can either accept all of it and it will go into an action, or we can accept part of it, that'll go into action, and we can hold some back? Okay.
Yeah, because at the last, be it further resolved, council directs city manager to implement the recommendations. If there's anything you don't want us to implement immediately,
Okay.
just add that as an amendment. Does that make sense,
Or you
Lynn?
can accept all of it and tell me to slow roll a portion of it.
Okay.
So we'll accept it,
You don't enact this part.
Give, give this
Okay.
part a little more time. That can be done as well.
I've never seen the city attorney put slow roll into a resolution.
It was synergistic.
Councilmember Ford?
Yeah, no, not going to amend anything, but like what you just said, City Attorney Lawrenson, I mean, I would hope that, not necessarily slow roll, but I want to respect the work that the subcommittee did, and I think it's quality work. But I also just want to make sure that any recommendations we do make are contingent on city staff reaching out and having some of these discussions, just to make sure we're not stepping in any landmines we don't know about. Just, I think that's the respectful thing to do.
So then are you, and I don't know if this is the proper place to do it, so then are you suggesting we pull that merger from this?
I am not suggesting we pull anything, quite the opposite.
Okay.
I think we go ahead and trust city staff to do due diligence.
If I understand that if we do not have time to talk to that committee before the other ordinances are ready to come forward, I will hold those for maybe an extra meeting and just bring them separately. That
Okay.
I'll bring the ones that we know are good to go, and then give that extra time. I can easily do that.
Because with all due respect to all the boards and committees, I want to approve this as presented to us. I think it was very well thought out and delivered. I'm open to other people's opinions, but, and whether we do it slow, whether we do it all at one time, I'm open on that, but I do want to accept this as presented.
Seeing as nobody else will press the buttons, or is planning on pressing them, I guess now's my time. So first off, I try to make it a really good practice of not disagreeing with Councilmember Ford. I think what he said and how he said it was very on point in terms of, this is about purpose, right? So making sure we clearly remind each board and commission as to their purpose, and that one, it is it's a role that they serve us in terms of communicating back to us what they believe is best. And it's not about devaluing any of them, because they all do provide a value, and they provide needed citizen input to this process. So that's a good thing. Regular review is really important, so building in a trigger mechanism every couple of years. It's just automatic. It's not going to be on one council member or a group saying, hey, we got to do this, and then, because it's like touching the third rail when you don't want to fire volunteers. That's the worst, right? We've had this discussion over the last couple of years while I've been on council. We've had some different and interesting conversations regarding appointments and people being renewed and not. At the end, these are citizens who love this community and want to help it be in a better place. But it's got to be a manageable number of boards and commissions. It's got to be a manageable number of people on them. It's got to be people who are interested in the actual purpose and then show up to do that, to execute that purpose. We've moved away from that in the last couple of years. We've seen that with some of the numbers. I want to thank Deputy Mayor and former Councilmember Miller for their actions and their work on this, and as well as city staff. But I agree. I think this thing in its entirety is a good work product. I'll be honest, when I read it, the only thing that really I questioned was arts and museum. I talked to the city manager, and I still kind of questioned it a little bit. I think there's more of a, I'm not going to use synergy. There's more an alignment to me mentally with landmarks. But I think that's too in the weeds for me at this point, that this is about a higher level approach. And if that's what my colleagues recommended after they went through the process, I trust them, that they made the best recommendation that they saw on how to move us forward for the next couple of years or longer. So I trust that process, and I'd accept it as well. So, Mr. Beulah.
I just wanted to add one thing, because I thought what you said is great, but one thing that jumped out to me is when you said that these boards and committees exist to serve city council. I just want to add the word creatively. Creatively, thank you. There you go. Words are hard.
I finally started.
I know I drop it.
Creatively, yes, excellent. And that's, yes, they exist to serve, and they exist to serve creatively, and that is awesome to bring more voices into the conversation.
Any other discussion, actions? If not, we'll call the roll and accept it as is.
Erickson,
Aye.
Ford,
Aye.
Stevenson,
Aye.
Bulow,
Aye.
Hayes,
Aye.
Esslinger,
Aye.
Mughawar.
Aye.
Carried 7.
In terms of, before we move on to the last part of the agenda, in terms of process, it would be my suggestion, especially for the transit, of the 3 that would be looking to combine. As part of that process, that's a difficult one. There's a ton of members. We're going to whittle it down to 5 from, if my memory serves me, it's, probably 21, 7, 7, and 7 possibly. Close to it at least. Process-wise, in my opinion, it makes a lot of sense to formally disband those 3 and create an entirely new one that then those members can apply to. So instead of selectively choosing them, that we've made the decision that we're going to combine, and if anybody among them are interested, then they can just apply instead of being told your services are no longer needed in that fashion, I guess. That would be my preference. And that it allows some of them to choose whether or not they want to continue serving, because some of them may be in their first year, second year of their terms. So just doing it by attrition with ends of terms doesn't just get us there. So I don't know if there's any other direction, if anybody wanted to comment on that, but that'd be my suggestion. Councilmember Ressler.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe just to elaborate on that, maybe for the city attorney or the city manager, go to those that are going to be dissolved and have some type of paperwork drawn up saying, it appears as though the council is going to be disbanding this, that, and the other commission. We certainly would like to have you serve in a new capacity. A new board is going to be created. We would love you to put in an application at this time. In the future, the council will vote on that. The mayor needs to know who to put that on, so the sooner we can get applicants for that, the sooner the council can ultimately make the decision on who's going to serve on those boards and committees.
And I'll be reaching out, and I know we've moved off of an action item, and I probably veered into a territory that Lynn may or may not like. She's smiling at me, I know she is. But absolutely, and that's part of actually the process that I'll be going through no matter what, and even with the current ones, knowing that there's going to be some reductions if people want to move around. That'll be plenty of phone calls and emails, but
Yep.
that's the role, and I'll be doing that already.
Yep.
So I'm sure city staff will jump in too, but it'll be a part of the process, absolutely. I promise that. So.
That's how easy it is to apply.
Councilmember Ford reminds me, and I will do it again later, boards and commissions, if you're interested in serving in the city of Oshkosh, hit the website up. I'll touch on it later, but there's a tab for it. You can easily apply online. Quite honestly, there's very low requirements to be on a board and commission, 18, a resident, and that's about it. So,
Let's fill those student spots.
and we have student spots. All right, so let's move on to the last part of the agenda, council discussion, direction to city manager. Future agenda items. We have options to reduce and eliminate special assessments. That's a future agenda item. You gave us some information recently. You want to discuss that?
Yeah, with so many new council members, I felt it was appropriate to give you a little background about where this all came from. I know that council members, including the new council members, have mentioned to me, so clearly you've been looking at this issue because you've been hearing about this issue, but there is a long history to it, and there's also the current special assessment policy. So I wanted to make sure that, as by way of background, you had all that. So the special assessment policy is in there, as well as a summary of the options that Public Works Director Robbie, Finance Director Van Gompel, and myself took a look at, and then City Attorney Lawrenson and I discussed these as well. That's summary, and originally that was going to be the initial discussion point, but I thought I'd give you more background to it. On page 196 of your agenda, that's just options to reduce/eliminate special assessments. And really the direction from the council, and any of the returning council members, please help clarify this, but we had discussed the possibility of a transportation utility fee, and that received a variety of receptions from various parts of the community, but the council said, if it's still in the courts and if it's subject to legislative change at the state level, can you show us some options that don't involve a fee? So this is what you see in front of you are the options of that. And they, just a brief summary. The first one is to just have the general obligation debt assume the cost to completely eliminate special assessments. When I say eliminate special assessments, I'm talking about street sidewalks, not necessarily water and sewer. That's a little different. But that estimated cost is about $3 to $4 million annually, and I'm surprised that Mr. Robbie was so generous with me and didn't say, well, you ought to bump that up given the numbers that have been changing in recent years. The other is to place a cap on residential special assessments. That was something that Councilmember Ford, he may wish to elaborate, because this was one that he was advocating for us to review. Not necessarily advocating to do, but just, I think we need to have that discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, so when the original directive was given, this before my time on council, you were tasked to eliminate special assessments. I tend to think that special assessments are not inherently inequitable. I think us being, third highest in the state per capita, that's the problem. And I think these nightmare assessments are the most inequitable ones. I mean, I actually disagree with the way it was put out here. That doesn't help the most in need. I do think when you're capping special assessments, the ultimate inequity is when you're basically special assessing somebody who lives on a corner lot out of their house and home. So that's the one I was really interested in, if that was a logical option. And that requires understanding how much that would actually cost. And I know I had reached out to City Manager Roloff about just basically a distribution of our assessments for streets and sidewalk to get an idea of how many of these nightmare assessments actually exist.
And for, by way of history, when I said when we hopped 41, we had not done a special assessment for residential properties west of 41 until we did 9th a couple years ago. And when Councilmember Ford refers to nightmare assessments, these were people, in some cases on 9th, they had triple frontage. They had the side street as well as their front street, and they were backing up to 9th Avenue. Those were $20,000 plus special assessments. So that's what he's referring to. I probably should have put the in opposite order 3 and 2, because I have a very fond memory, not fond, unpleasant memory of a young woman who lived on Harney Street. She and her husband had just purchased a house. They probably paid $40,000 for the house, and then were hit with a $7,000 assessment. So we effectively increased the cost of their house by about 20%. And the poor young woman was almost inconsolable. This is 10 years ago, and they thought they were going to lose their house because they wouldn't be able to make the payment, and they had worked so hard. So when I think of, in number 3, assuming the floor, and that's where, for somebody in that situation, Mike doesn't have that memory because Mike wasn't on the council at that time, but I remember that had we covered a floor, then their assessment would have only been about $2,000, about 5% of their value. So a much different situation. So that's why the wording, I said, does not help the most in need. To me, the most in need are the folks who have a low-value house and a high-cost assessment. So we can, they're both not good, though.
Well, I think you're getting at the same topic there.
Yeah. So there's 2 different ways to look at it. We cap it, and one of the things that we had to look at with number 2, and this is where city attorney had to come in, because there were discussions about, well, tie it to the value of the house. The minute you start tying an assessment to the value of the house, it starts taking on the characteristics of a tax, an ad valorem value-based tax, and we can't do that. But there are other ways to do it. So as the 3 of us were talking about it, it was, well, what if we just focused on residential? We're not capping, don't want to single out our friends at the university, but the university had a $1.4 million assessment from Algoma Boulevard. You cap every assessment at $20,000. We just gave a bargain to a non-property tax paying property owner. So those are the dilemmas. But if we just capped it for residential, and I think, James, the definition is really more the, we'd have to tweak our policy a little bit, and that's why I put the policy in there, because we've got some nuances in our policy that I don't even think I appreciate as much as James does, because James has to prepare these.
Yeah, there are 2 different residential categories in our special assessment policy. Residential 1, or Res 1 as we refer to it, is really 1 and 2 family homes. Residential 2, or Res 2 as we refer to it, is higher number of dwelling units, 3 and up, and all institutional properties. So all governmental buildings, whether it be state, city, or county, fall in that Res 2 category. So, that's where, as city manager said, we would want to take a look at, probably changing our definitions in our policy to kind of break the institutional side of it out of the multifamily residential.
So I think that kind of covers the whole, there are options to implement it and minimize the impact and not provide an incredible benefit to one class of properties and really then it gets transferred to us, the taxpayer. The floor is really just, you pick a floor and then it doesn't cap it, but for those who have, that's the situation I described on Harney, that provides relief to those people. Arguably more equitable because we're taking care of people with lower value homes but high assessments. And we didn't put an estimated cost on there because that can range. It won't be as high as the 3 to 4 million. Option 1 is you knock it all off. And James, I was surprised you didn't say, yeah, you may want to take that 4 million and inch it up a little bit.
I'm still working on that analysis for you
Yeah,
yet. So.
and I'm going to get into a little bit of that to kind of illustrate the problem. The other one is we currently in residential areas assess a third, meaning each side of the street pays a third of the assessment and then the city covers the final third. We could move that around to say each side of the street pays 25%, we pay 50% as a city. So you can play that as well. That will lower the assessments. It doesn't eliminate them though. So it depends on what your goal is. And you can play that all you want. I just threw 2 other options out there. You can, as long as it adds up to 100%, you can do whatever you want.
And I think one thing I'd like to add to that too, depending on which residential category, there's a cap on the street width. So the city manager mentioned reconstructing West 9th Avenue a couple of years ago. That was built as a 48-foot wide street, but those single-family residential homes are paying a third of a maximum of 32. So the city is picking up all of that additional width cost. So I think an important distinction that is easily missed.
And that's why we put the policy in there so you can, get yourself up to speed on what those are. In reality, even when we do a third, because we do credits for corner lots and things like that, we normally pick up probably about 40 to 45% of the total cost when all is said and done.
And all of the intersections. So I would say it's probably 45 to 50%.
So we're picking up a little more.
I don't want to derail your.
I'm just going through these.
If you can remind us, commercial, so right now residential is third, commercial currently is
37 and a half, 25. And that's capped at a 48-foot street.
So
we already do differentiate between different property
Yes.
usage right now. So just in terms of.
That's the real.
It's a good distinction that we already are differentiating. I just wanted to thank you.
So adding, saying we're going to cap residential, maybe Res 1, or, or create a new category, you can do those things because we already do it. We can, this has a negative connotation, we can discriminate and say, we're going to say this class should pay a higher amount. We already do that with commercial property. So it's not unusual. It's just, the word discriminating doesn't mean you're doing something bad.
I thought she was giving me a dirty look before, but. No.
But I think you got to look at the term, what that means. There may be a legal definition, but we already clarify.
We can treat them differently.
We can treat them differently, and we do. And we're not the only ones doing that. Then lastly, the other one that, I know that some of the existing council members are aware that the most voluminous part of special assessments or special charges is the sidewalk program. We send out about 2,000 bills annually, and they're quite annoying to the residents, and they're staff intensive.
Yeah, it's, the entire city, 25,000 parcels split into, 10 sections. It's about 2,500 letters we have to send out every year. Not everyone ends up with an invoice. But, my front office staff has to go through and out of the list of all the properties, they have to go through and highlight the address for each individual parcel before it gets stuffed into the letter, so it is an exceptionally labor-intensive process that we haven't found a way to automate yet.
So one of the options is to eliminate the sidewalks, which would cost us about $1 million, or maybe more these days, but the idea of volume-wise would reduce that. So that's just one option, and we've always put that in there. You could do that separately, you could do that with something, you could do that one. But it's easily $1 million cost that, when I say cost, then we have to borrow for that as opposed to special assess for that. So those are the five, and I should have prefaced this, where's the page, James?
And sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
Go ahead, because I
When
gotta
you
look for
say
the page anyway.
Eliminate we would still have the sidewalk rehabilitation program. We would just do it. Is that what this is suggesting?
We would just eat the cost.
Yes, we'd still have the program, but we would be paying for it out of city funds.
And while Mark is looking for that page number, another benefit of that could be expanding the program. Oftentimes, people come to the council and say, hey, I don't really want to have sidewalks here, you know? And sometimes it's because they have to pay, sometimes it's not really because they have to pay. But if the goal of the council is to expand that sidewalk program, then, you know, not having to pay is another feature that might facilitate that plan.
So those are the five basic options, and one of the goals that council set for me was to bring this forward. With 4 new council members, I didn't think this was appropriate to say, all right, here, vote on this now. I wanted to present it, answer questions, not just tonight, but just, you know, something will get triggered a day or two later. But I wanted to bring to your attention the framing the problem, and if you look at page 207, it has 10 years' worth of rates for street assessments. And James did show the 32 and 36 residential and non-residential concrete. You can see that the cost for a 32-foot residential concrete street, we assessed it at $64.60 per foot in 2014. That cost is now $124. We've nearly doubled the cost in 10 years. That's the scary part. And when that average is about 7% increase a year. That's what the residents are howling at you about. That's the framing of, you know, why are they complaining? This is why they're complaining, because the folks 10 years ago, they were complaining 10 years ago. Don't mistake anything. But it's doubled. And that's a lot for the public to absorb. So with that, that's my presentation. Happy to answer any questions either now or in the future. But I think from the 3 council members who are carried over, this was part of it. It's just, we got to get the discussion going, because waiting is just killing us.
Councilmember Beulah.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for that awesome presentation. The only thing that I'd like to question about, since we're taking the time tonight, is to talk a little bit, because these are options as opposed to a transportation utility fee, which is that still being challenged, or is that out of challenge, the Pewaukee case?
I'd be happy to tell you about it, but I think James probably knows more than I do, because he's in regular contact. But the Village of Pewaukee prevailed with a lawsuit from Wisconsin Manufacturers Commerce, which was kind of odd, because I don't think WMC owes any property in the Village of Pewaukee, but they sued and they didn't prevail on many different levels. Their standing was one, but there were other ones, and Lynn, I know you looked at it too. There were other issues, but the logic is really sound, and I think that's why Pewaukee prevailed. Their consultant is the same consultant that we have used. Identical approach. I'm not aware of any.
A few minor minutia things with, I think, some of the limited access state roads that they had going through there, but the actual methodology and approach was exactly the same as the analysis we had them doing for us.
So the dilemma that we faced was, you know, at the time, the council directed me to do this, the Pewaukee case was still up in the air. Had we lost, had they lost, that would have been a problem. That is going to get appealed and go all the way.
Say, what level of court was that?
This was Waukesha County Circuit Court. Now, that's encouraging, given the political makeup of Waukesha County, the fact that Pewaukee prevailed, that certainly was very compelling. But it could still go to the Supreme Court. Then, even if it prevails at the Supreme Court, that's not to say that the legislature could say, we've got to take this away, and then we get the rug pulled out from under us. So that's the other dilemma that we have. So I think that's why council is like, we just have to look at something non-fee related to at least discuss it. And, maybe the public says after that, we still want to do the fee, or, and I can give you another report that I referenced here. I've done a report with other options, such as wheel tax, which is vehicle registration fee. I think there's some serious inequities in that because of who's exempt from that fee. And it was going to be like $50 a car, which would be the most expensive wheel tax in the state. I really don't want to own that title.
Sure.
James, I don't know what else. I mean, I think we could provide that to you as well.
And then there's a transportation fee in Neenah, correct? Do I have that correct?
That's the one that failed at a 3-4 vote with the council.
Okay.
And as we looked at that, it's working in Neenah. Nobody's challenging it in Neenah. What happens in Neenah stays in Neenah, as far as I'm concerned. As we've looked at it more, that kind of glad we didn't do that one because of what I'm aware of. But the irony is there are businesses in Neenah, and the same businesses operate in Oshkosh. They complain like crazy about ours, didn't raise a word in Neenah. What happens in Neenah stays in Neenah, so.
Councilmember Resslinger.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Roloff, in your deliberations on moving forward different options that we have, I think kind of by default, the reason we're doing this, and you're spending time on this and talking to the council, is the 800-pound gorilla in the room is these fees are too much for people to pay. So while I think you're doing a great job of looking at different options that we can look at for the future, in your analysis, is there anything that you're looking at that can, I guess for lack of a better word, compensate those who have been zapped the last, I mean, you can't go back 100 years, clearly. The last 5 years, 10 years. So if we implement something new, which the process probably would work better, but we've kind of told the people then that we've extracted the money from, that they kind of got the short end of the stick for so many years. So, how have you thought of that? Will you think of that? And just your general reaction to that comment.
That point did come up in 2019 when the council voted down the Neenah base fee. And I said I wouldn't say Neenah again, and now I'm saying it again. Neenah actually did something in that regard, which I thought was one positive feature. They did a sliding credit on the fee itself for the first 5 years. So if your assessment was 1 year old, you got 5 years of relief from that fee. And then they did 4, 3, 2, 1 based on the number of years. So somebody who had a 5-year-old assessment, they gave them 1 year of relief. So that's how Neenah did it. We could do that, but then let's say we did a fee. We'd have to figure out, do you do that with the fee, or what do you do with the assessment? When we were discussing that back in 2019, there were residents who came up and said that very point. That adds cost to the program, and that would increase the fee, which then exacerbates the problem. So it's one of those things you just rip off the Band-Aid and be done with it. It's a legitimate issue. And I can tell you that the people who've been assessed the last couple of years wanted you to do it in that very year, so they didn't get that charge. But you defined it well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I had a property on Main Street that I got zapped, and my God, I only had like 50 feet, and it was
But it was a wonderful 50 feet.
$15,000 or something like that.
It was. Yeah. And that was with a bargain because we got a state grant for that.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah,
Good point.
Think about all those things.
Good point.
That's a big dilemma that we have. So
Thanks.
I give it to you not for action. I think, this is kind of became a mini workshop. I'd be happy to bring it back.
Councilmember Stevenson does have his button pressed. We'll let him go.
We can talk about that. I mean, it sounds like we'll have more opportunity to kind of talk about this later.
Yeah, this is really just to kind of lay the groundwork. I will get you the other reports. The one that talked about the different options like the wheel tax and things like that. So at least you know we have looked at those things, but there's pros and cons to every one of these. There is no perfect solution. And every city is wrestling with this issue.
So, one thing for me, 5 years ago, I reignited the conversation, and that's why we had it for a little while going on. So I'll own that. One thing that, actually, I don't remember if Councilmember Ford is going to remember it or not, but we were sitting in a workshop or in a closed session, I don't remember the evening, but basically the question came up as to, what are we trying to accomplish? Now, for what we were doing, the group that was sitting up here 5 years ago knew what we were trying to do. But when he brought that up, it was a light bulb moment of that body at that time didn't know what we were trying to accomplish. So just as we go down this path, consider what you want to accomplish. The reason for it before was eliminate special assessments for road work. Provide that relief. That was the goal. And then a council change and a council change, and maybe we had a different goal, but we never talked about the goal. If we go down this path, it should really clearly define where we actually were hoping to go before we go through a complete exercise and 7 people are in 7 different spots. So just for someone who's been discussing it for the last 5 years, I found that very insightful that we didn't know what we were trying to accomplish that night. So just some words, I guess, words to the wise, I guess, on that topic.
Mark's review.
That was it. There you go. So if that's it for that agenda item, if there's no other ones, we'll work future workshops, the 27th and 28th. We've got community development with a housing workshop on the 28th with our first budget workshop. Anything more you want to share on that?
Just a Tuesday, Wednesday combo before the 4th of July, so just get you'll earn your 4th of July holiday.
And the 27th is a council meeting night, correct?
Right, so we're going to do the workshop.
5 o'clock?
I think it's going to be 5, and I think the idea of the budget workshop, it usually takes a couple hours. We typically start at 5. If you think that's a problem, please let me know sooner than later, but the idea is to have them both at 5.
Okay. Yeah, so Wednesday night is usually 5 to 7, roughly. It hasn't, in my experience, gone much past 7, or very, very little after, so.
And just a clarification, the topic at the June 28th budget workshop is really more about CIP. We talk a lot about the connection between debt and the capital improvement program. Staff is submitting their capital improvement requests right now. I'm reviewing them, and we'll have that ready for you to review. It's a pretty big document, so there'll be a lot, but there's lots of summary pages too.
Councilmember Resslinger.
Thank you, Mayor. I remember way back when I was on the council, it was a kind of an unwritten rule that whenever we had workshops, we required the city manager to bring in pizza. So I don't know if that, want to carry on that
I
tradition.
recall that being the mayor, but that's a different story.
I don't want to pin it on anyone.
Love it.
With that, we'll move on to the next, no, just kidding. If there's nothing else on the workshops, we'll go to announcements and statements. Any announcements and statements? Councilmember Beulah.
Mr. Mayor, I know we were talking a little bit about emails that we get as city council, and I'm not going to read any specific ones, but I just wanted to make it clear for all citizens who email us. First of all, thank you. Keep those communications coming. And second of all, anything that you email to all of the city council representatives is automatically in our record, if you want to call it that. It has been received by us. I know I try to make it a point of responding to each one of them. But if you want to get something onto the agenda, let us know that ahead of time so that we have time to do that. But if it is something where you just want to make us aware or make your opinion known, please continue to reach out to us, because if we do all receive it, it is in the record that we have received it.
Councilmember Ford.
Yeah, so we had the Committee on Aging meeting, and we read the proclamation of Older Americans Month in the city of Oshkosh, and I wanted to mention it. It is May.
There you go. If there's nothing else, City Manager, take it away for your announcements and statements.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On page 211 of the agenda, I two-page brief update on my goals for the first quarter update on my goals for 2023. Happy to answer any questions. We really did talk a great deal about the special assessments. And I would also like to point out that we had a meeting, an Urban Alliance meeting. Those are the larger cities in the state. We had a meeting scheduled last week that coincided exactly with the Assembly Committee on Local Government meeting across the street in Madison from the hotel we were at. So we basically took a break from our meeting and went over there en masse. I think it was the first time every mayor or city manager of the largest 10 cities in the state were all there in an assembly room. So it was quite impactful. Equally impactful was we are very fortunate to have both our police chief and fire chief who are currently presidents of their respective state associations. So they spoke as well. And I will tell you that the uniforms carry a lot more weight in that room than a guy in a suit. And both Chief Smith and Stanley were very eloquent, expressing concerns specific to Oshkosh, but also in general to their colleagues throughout the state. I think it was very well received. I know there's some politicking going on, but that's what happens in Madison. But I can tell you that this is the first time in 30 years that I've seen substantive movement made to address the situation that is the state fiscal, local fiscal relationship is just not good and needs fixing. And I think we're making progress. There'll be a few little things that'll have to go back and forth, but the way it was proposed is that we would be looking at about a $960,000 increase in our shared revenue. And given the fact that the greatest increase we've seen in 20 years was one year we got an extra $6,000, and other years we had $1 million decrease. So gives you an idea of what the scale of that is. And all that is the state recognizing that the sales taxes are generated here at the local units of government, so let's return it. So that, I think we're making real good progress on that.
So that 900,000+, if that was to come to fruition, would you see that being annually, or would it be a one-time increase? Would it stick with us?
Even better than that, and this is one of the things that we kept talking about at the committee that I was at, that in a weird twist of events, Councilmember Ford was actually the staff to our committee, so I had my revenge on Mike at that time. But so Mike can add to the discussions that were happening.
Yeah.
Our mantra really was we wanted it to increase, so we've got that. It's something sustainable. The sales tax already exists. We're not proposing to increase the sales tax. We're saying we ought to get a cut of that because we generate that. Our businesses here in Oshkosh generate that sales tax. And then lastly, growing. The, as proposed, AB 245 will increase shared revenue by the increase in sales tax growth. Over the last 20 years, we've seen consistent sales tax growth of about 3.5% annually. So the short answer is yes, we would see an increase. Now, every 10 years or so, you get a recession, you have a slight decrease in sales tax. And we will see that when times get tough. Well, that's when we gotta toughen up and deal with that. I would much rather take that risk and get the benefit of the growth in most other years. So I'm welcoming that, and I think we're gonna do very well with that. And that growth is probably even better because we're getting, by a percentage increase, we're getting the lowest increase. We're getting the minimum 10%. That's all we're getting. There are other communities that are getting 300%. That's because they're getting about $20,000 a year, and 300,000 gets about an extra, $80,000. So the growth is really the key to this, and I'm very optimistic that we'll finally see growth. And I know Mr. Van Gompel and I have been, chasing this issue for 30 years each, and this is the most substantive we've seen in all this time. So I'll keep you posted on that. Any other questions about that?
I didn't.
I wasn't able to clear it. I got a tech issue.
Oh, it's okay. I can say something.
Nope. You keep going, Mark.
Okay, the next one, we have a professional services agreement for community risk assessment for the fire department. This is part of their process to get accredited. The cost is $42,000, but the fire department received a $33,000 grant, so it's all but about $9,000 of that. And then just a reminder, our council portrait, school dress-up day is next council meeting, May 23rd at 5:30 PM. We've been rotating who's in this seat for that, and I've asked Library Director Jeff Gilderson Dewey in his final appearance. He's never been part of the council photo, so I'm getting him in before he gets out. And then I have the outstanding issues update, which is a lot of the goals, so a little bit repetitive, but happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, the button's not working.
Can I keep
Councilmember
pushing?
Bulow. You can keep doing anything you want. Yeah.
No, so I just wanted to go back to 25, your goals in the first quarter, because I know your third goal, expanding the scope of addressing homelessness in Oshkosh. I didn't know if maybe you had anything coming up on this Thursday that you'd like to talk about that pertains to that goal.
I would be happy to, so thanks for tossing that softball to me. Yes, on Thursday, the Day by Day Warming Shelter will hold their grand opening ceremony. I didn't think that should be something me taking credit for, that's why I didn't necessarily.
Well, you're going to be there, and it
I
is,
will
it is
be
on
there.
your list.
I've already had an opportunity to take a tour of the facility. Our police department has taken a tour of the facility, and they believe that this facility is going to do wonders to reduce issues that have been occurring at Day by Day in its current setup. So much thought was put into the facility, and I would encourage you to attend and get a look-see yourself. I think it's going to help us better address homeless issues in the community and hopefully put the guests of Day by Day on a path to get out of homelessness, which is everybody's goal. Did I do a good job on that
You did a
commercial?
great job.
All right. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Well, without any objection, we'll take a motion and second to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.